Hello and welcome to another edition of Investor Talk Radio. I'm your host and founder, Curt Davis, and joining me for the second time actually is Robert Feol. Robert, welcome to the show.
Curt, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here today, and I'm so thrilled whenever we get together and talk about advanced real estate techniques, and also kind of try to spearhead some things that help newer investors get a foothold on their journey. Things that I wish we had 20 years ago when you and I started.
Absolutely. Now, for anyone who's listening or watching, because we're actually recording this today, is if you're not familiar with Robert Feol, I'm going to give you a few brief bullet points about Robert. Now, Robert is a former school teacher in the Memphis City Schools. What did you teach?
I was a music teacher. I taught K through 5 music.
I knew that.
Many years.
I knew that. Robert has a degree in deaf education. He has a second degree black belt in martial arts, and he just received his purple belt in jiu-jitsu. Congratulations.
Thank you. It took 5 years of training almost every day, so it was a very exciting time.
It's incredible. Robert is a junior Olympic volleyball coach. He has a master's in classical guitar.
We have,
correct?
Almost. We've been working on getting the master's in doctorate in guitar. We've made a lot of headway there.
You are a barbecue champion. You received state championship titles in Virginia and Arkansas for barbecue sauce, first place, and in Mississippi, brisket champion. Now, that was when we got the perfect score, correct?
We had a perfect score in ribs. In Mississippi, we won first place. We didn't quite have a perfect score. We were very close there, but we also recently hit the 700 Club, which in Kansas City Barbecue Society means that you're almost close to a perfect score in all categories. So that was exciting.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
And for about a decade, starting in 2009, you were the founder of Pieces of the Puzzle, Journeys in Creative Real Estate Investing, which was actually the #1 weekend talk radio show on 990 KOM, correct?
That's correct. And you were a co-host with me on many, many episodes. We've had such a wonderful time there.
It was a lot of fun. Now, one thing I didn't write down on here, which of course, I'm reading from this because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. What a lot of people don't know is that when I moved to Memphis and started real estate, I actually worked for you, and you were like my first real estate mentor.
That's true, and I think you were my first real estate employee, so to speak. Being a teacher and not really having a corporate background, but that was a very, very good experience. Learning how to manage people and learning. People like you that have just amazing work ethic and work performance, and then working with other people who, are always just trying to slide by. When you get into the world of entrepreneurship, like we're in now, and you're hiring staff, and you're really looking for the best. And, Curt, you taught me what it means to be the best.
I appreciate it. Now, we're going to be talking about the Short-Term Retirement Program, which is a book that Robert wrote. I just actually received this last week, and I have been able to get into a good portion of the book.
Just released. Exciting. Very exciting.
So you can order this book on Amazon. We will be providing a link below that you can click on it and check out if you want to look at it. But before we actually talk about the book, let's talk about you. Where are you from?
Well, originally I'm from upstate New York, a small town called Rochester, New York, which is about an hour away from the Canadian border if you actually take the ferry across Lake Ontario there. So,
did you ever go to Canada?
We've been to Canada many times. So that's considered the big adventure trip when you're in grade school. You get on a bus and go to Canada.
How does somebody from Rochester end up in Memphis?
Well, do you want the long version or do you want the short version?
Kind of like the in-between version.
Well, the short version is I grew up in Rochester in a single-parent home with my mother, who worked 3 jobs, and it was all about going to school and getting good grades. And I think you understand,
yes.
Kind of the standard American dream.
Oh, yes.
So I went to Syracuse, and I was a triple major there, undergraduate, and I graduated. And then I taught school. And in New York, if you're a teacher, if you don't get a master's degree within 5 years starting teaching, you lose your teaching license. So after I taught for a few years, I ended up getting a scholarship to one of 2 all-deaf colleges in the nation called the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, where everything is taught in sign language. So I went to fulfill my requirements for New York. And during that time, I was playing and performing classical and jazz guitar and fingerstyle guitar. Had a pretty good following around Rochester, and I got invited to audition for the graduate program at the University of Memphis. So I flew down here. I'd never been to Memphis, never really been in the South. And I was awarded a full graduate scholarship to come down here. And part of that was teaching guitar, and that was kind of my dream at the time. So I sold everything I owned, and I moved down here with my German Shepherd. I lived on the railroad tracks over in Orange Mound because I had no idea, where to go, and I was broke at the time.
It was close to
college. Very close to school, and it was like $550 a month. So that's how I came to Memphis.
So you moved to Memphis and you started teaching and attending class, correct?
I was teaching at the university, and I was, taking class. And a lot of that is performance-based in the world of guitar. So performing in master classes and giving concerts and a lot of independent practice and study. But basically, I ended up, about a year later, I took a little break from the university. I had been offered a full-time teaching position in the Memphis City Schools. So I took the position full-time, and I taught for about 5.5 years in the Memphis City Schools.
You sound busy.
It was very busy time. But I wasn't really getting anywhere. That was the interesting thing. I was teaching, 5 days a week, and then lesson planning on the weekends. And summertime, when you have, summer break, I was teaching, workshops and camps and trying to make, an extra $1,000 here and there.
Sure.
And I wasn't really getting anywhere. So that was kind of part of the hiatus the impetus, I should say, for me to start to think about taking a hiatus from teaching and looking at bigger things in real estate.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. How did real estate come into the picture? You're teaching full time, you're busy. Where does real estate enter the picture?
Well, that's a great question, Curt.
I know that's kind of a loaded question, but
it's a loaded question, but it's a great question, and it's a question that I think a lot of listeners out there maybe can identify with. My original retirement plan, and I'll share this with you, and you will now laugh, was to spend 30 years teaching in the Memphis City School District and to buy 10 duplex homes. And my thought was, I have 30 years until retirement. It takes 30 years to pay off loans. So 30 years from now, assuming I'm alive and healthy, right?
You can start living the American dream.
I'll have a pension, and I'll have 10 paid off duplexes, which would give me, a significant income, on a teacher's salary. But the problem that I ran into was when I went to buy my first duplex and I was at the closing table, the lender came over and in front of the closing attorney, the agent, and a bunch of people I didn't know who were all sitting at this big table, was like kind of yelling at me. It was just obviously a very hard loan to get done. And he was like, "You'll never get another loan. You have too much debt. You have $100,000 in student loans. Your credit cards are almost maxed out. You're lucky I got this. You should be thanking me right now." And I wanted to crawl under a rock.
You're like, "Can I just quit, tap out?"
But, I finished signing. I'm like, well, at least I'll have this one duplex, right? The retirement plan's shot because you can't get to 10. But it made me realize that in order to get to 10 duplexes for me, I was going to have to start looking at some alternative parts of real estate and aspects of real estate. So that was where I really started to think about the fact that a traditional plan for someone in my financial situation was realistically not attainable at the time, given my financial condition.
Sure. So you bought this duplex. You're in theory now you're a real estate investor,
so to speak.
Yeah. Yes.
So to speak. I have one duplex and I own my own home with a big loan on it.
From the time that you purchased this first duplex, what's kind of the backstory into getting involved in more of a, because eventually at some point in time you quit teaching to get into real estate full time. From the time that you purchased that first duplex to the time you could say you're getting into full time real estate and you're really at that point where you're looking to walk away from teaching because now teaching is really kind of getting in the way of real estate, what kind of time frame are we looking at? What are some of the things that maybe happened in between that? Because keep in mind, back in this time, the sexy real estate shows about flipping homes and all that kind of stuff, none of that was happening.
Well, and I'm kind of glad that none of that, I didn't have any of that. Of course, I didn't have cable either.
Yeah, but real estate investing wasn't as popular then as it is now. So what would you kind of fill in some of that gap for me?
Well, the way it started for me was I had a girlfriend at the time who was from Savannah, Georgia, and she came from a really wealthy family. And she thought my real estate ideas, the ideas of buying duplexes and becoming wealthy through, let's just use real estate acquisitions, for lack of a better term. She thought it was an absolute joke. Her dad was a doctor, and anyways, long story made short, she broke up with me shortly after because her parents told her that, I was a school teacher and that's all I'd ever be.
Sure.
Which is the best thing that happened to me at the time, but, a little bit of a bump in the road.
Of course.
And around the same time that happened, I had a friend, and I talk about this in the book, named Rob Seward. And Rob Seward was 26, and he was diagnosed with terminal lymphoma. He was a good friend of mine. He was a gaming friend. He and I would play Magic the Gathering and other games at this local game store. It's kind of how we developed a friendship. And one day he came over, it was a few weeks before he died, and he had 2 books with him. And he said, my dad and I always talked about investing in real estate, but because I won't be here in a few weeks, you're the only guy I know who might be able to use these books. And he gave me 2 books. And one of them, I don't remember the name.
I was just going to ask.
It's somewhere, but the other one was a book that changed my life. It was called Building Wealth by Russ Whitney.
Okay.
And I read the book, and if you know anything about Russ Whitney, he was kind of first-generation real estate investor writer. Mm-hmm. But Russ Whitney also was a high school dropout, and he spent time in prison, and as an ex-con, right? Mm-hmm. Totally turned his life around. He's a total hero, rags to riches story. But in his book, and I don't know if it's because he dropped out of high school, so he wrote at a very understandable level, which I could relate to or whatever. He talks about in his book how there was one transaction he did where basically he had 4 homes and they were all seller financed. And he went to his banker, and his banker offered him a really significant discounted interest rate to refinance these 4 homes. But let's say he owed $100,000 on each of these 4 homes, so he has $400,000 in debt. And his banker said, I can give you a loan up to $200,000. And what Russ did, which to me was genius, and I've used this technique a lot, but of course I never knew that you could do this, is he went to each of the lenders that were private lenders that had long-term loans on his properties, and he said, listen, I'll pay you off in full. But he said, I'll pay you off if you give me a discount. So instead of me paying you for 27 more years on a 30-year loan, I'll pay you in full. But I can't pay you the $100,000. What's the least you'll take if I can give you a lump sum of cash in 2 weeks? And all 4 of those guys discounted it, and he ended up taking $400,000 worth of debt, reducing it to $200,000, just by slashing the debt on paper, cut his interest rate in half, refinance it with the bank. He improved his cash flow a month by like $2,000, and he would have had these houses. He goes on the story and paid off in like a couple years. And for me, that was where the light bulb went on, because I thought to myself, well, traditionally I go to the bank, I get turned down, but there's people that will hold a mortgage for me, and then I might be able to discount it. And if you've read the book, we talk about that in the first chapter, how I paid off.
It's actually my favorite chapter of the book.
How I paid off my Adirondack vacation home for a fraction of its value using that technique. So that was a real light bulb moment, and I have to give credit to my friend who did pass away a few weeks later for giving me that book. So that was kind of the first entry. And the second entry was I was attending my RIA group, which you were on the board of the local RIA here for many years. And they had a guy named Scott Reister who came in here. And Scott Reister talked about a term that we use called wholesaling.
Sure.
The idea that if you find a deal, but because if you don't have cash, credit, or capacity to close the deal, you can take your contract and essentially sell that contract for cash to more qualified and accredited investors.
Do you remember your first wholesale deal?
I do.
Do you remember how much you made?
I do. Yes.
How much was it?
It was $3,786 and like 25 cents or something.
Now that's a good little check for your first wholesale deal. But when you made that, how significant was that when you looked at that and the time invested compared to your teaching salary and what you made?
Well, that's a great question. The most important thing that I want to share here is that I took the seminar. The way the RIA group worked here was the speaker came in Thursday, stayed over Friday, and then would teach an all-day seminar Saturday.
Correct.
So I went Thursday, and I listened to Scott Reister, and then it was like $70, which is like all of the money that I had in my checking account at the time. So I wrote him the check. Friday, went to my teaching job. Saturday at 8 a.m. at the University of Memphis, I rode over, sat in my chair, and brought a little notebook and took notes. And at the end of that workshop, it was 8 to 5, I had learned so much. I thought to myself, I can do this. And the same week, I went and I found a deal, 735 Kent Street.
How did you find it?
Well, there's a website here called crylike.com. And crylike.com gives you access to the multiple listing service. So I started to look at properties that I thought were undervalued in the sub $20,000 range. And I was able to find a house for $10,000. And a teaching colleague of mine bought it from me the following week for $15,000. Now I didn't close it properly. I would have made $5,000 versus almost $3,800. But when I got that check and I walked out of the attorney's office, that was more than a month by about $200 of my teaching pay.
And how many hours did you have invested into that transaction?
Maybe four. And I thought to myself, this is going to change things for me, because I just did this and I barely started. And with that newfound confidence, I kept my job. I was not leaving my job at the time, but it was a real game changer for me. And it made me realize, well, there's a finite number of times I need to do this before I have my $100,000 in student loans paid off, before I have my credit cards paid off. It's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But if I work hard and I keep doing this over and over and over again, I can really get some financial traction.
Sure. So essentially you started out wholesaling.
That's exactly how I started. Yeah. Because the lender, when I closed the duplex,
said you can't buy anymore.
You're out of luck.
Sorry.
Yeah, and he actually did me a favor. He actually did me a favor, and I think you'll agree that in the world of real estate, when a door closes, that doesn't mean the answer is no. It means go knock on another door.
That's right. So you start wholesaling. Obviously, things start to pick up. You're wholesaling more. You're closing more deals. Checks are getting bigger, and you obviously get to a point where teaching gets in the way, I'm sure.
Yes, I'll say I came to a crossroads, so to speak, and the crossroads was I took a local investor here out to lunch who I had bought some wholesale deals from me. Because at this point, I was doing well. And, I happened to have a teaching assignment, which I really loved. It was great. It was kindergarten through fourth grade. I had a lot of free time. Which I was using to find deals on the multiple listing service at the using the school's internet, right? And that was great. And the principal would look at me strangely when I was faxing contracts back and forth. This is before the days of
DocuSign.
Exactly. So the way it worked out was I took an investor to lunch who I had a lot of respect for. I saw him teach at the local RIA group, and he said something to me that day which I'll never forget. And I can see that day, the words he said to me, it was so many years ago. And he looked at me and he goes, "Robert, I've watched a lot of guys get into this business." He said, "But I've been watching you. We've done some deals. But I watch you. I watch how you talk to people and how you think." And he said, "I've never met anybody before who has," and he paused for a second, and he clenched his fist and he goes, "It." And I was like, I don't know what you mean. And he goes, like a gift for real estate investing. He's like, "You have it." And he's like, "I want you to come work for me." Naturally, my response was, "Well, that sounds great in theory, but, I'm tenured now with the school district. I have benefits, all these things."
Scary to think about walking away.
But in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, I make $50,000 a year now, so if I could work full time for $100,000, then that would be, and get benefits, that would be great, And he goes, "Well, I pay $500 a week, and there's no benefits." And I'm sitting here doing the math in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, $500 a week is like me taking a 50% pay cut, plus I have to pay for my health insurance.
Yeah.
And then he looked at me, he said, but instead of you wholesaling houses to me, what if you just find deals for me, and you find me 5 deals a month, and I pay you $2,000 per deal? And at that point, you know, I'm looking at the $10,000 a month mark plus $500 a week.
Sure.
Granted, it's not guaranteed, but I had worked with this gentleman long enough to know that he was very legit. And I went home and I talked to my girlfriend about it, new girlfriend, who's now my wife for 15 years. And I did it. I took the jump. I went in and I told my principal that I was leaving, and he was really very gracious about it and very kind, but he was very sorry to see me go.
Sure.
And that's it. The following Monday, I went in, 8 a.m., and there was a guy named Ryan who was sitting next to me at a table just like this, and he took this, what was an old flip Cricket mobile phone, and he slid it near me like this with the charger, and he goes, "Good luck." And I thought to myself,
what's that mean?
Why is he telling me good luck? And if you've ever got in the world of renting houses full time, you understand. So that was the transition, but I'm very grateful for that. I think I would have meandered into real estate full time at some point had that opportunity not come along.
Sure.
But that put me in a crucible. Really put me to the test.
Sure.
And I write significantly about that in the book, about how becoming a rental agent, in my opinion, is one of the greatest resources somebody who is broke and wants to get into real estate can do. A lot of people think, well, I'll go get my real estate license. I'll become an agent.
Sure.
And to me,
it's a lot more work.
there is no comparison to being out taking 200 calls a day and meeting people who want to rent houses or don't want to rent houses. But we can talk about that later.
That's another podcast.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I know we're going to skip a lot here. Obviously, from the time that you took that position and came aboard that company and really started your full-time real estate investing career, you've owned several businesses since then. You've amassed a personal portfolio of many homes. I kind of want to get into the short-term retirement program. Again, it's the short-term retirement program. We will have a link for this that you can check out. Purchase the book if you like. You should get a copy. It's incredible. Right there. Looks good.
Very nice cover.
That's a strong cover, by the way.
Do you like the logo?
I do.
The short-term retirement.
The phoenix
logo.
rising from the flames,
roof
or
line,
something like that.
The roof line.
I love it.
So yes, we're very pleased with how it turned out, and I have to give a shout out to New Shelves Publishing and Bestseller Builders here, who are the kind of publishing advocates who brought my book to the market through Dark Horse Solutions. They've done such a phenomenal job. They only work with like 20 authors a year, and I was fortunate enough to be selected as one of their authors that they chose to bring my book to market. So I'm extremely thankful, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out.
Well, I know you've put in a lot of time, a lot of sweat equity into this book to get it to where it's at. Simply put, in a nutshell, for the listeners and the viewers, what is the short-term retirement program? What is it?
Well, the short-term retirement program is more of a cognitive mindset. And the book's broken down into 3 parts, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the short-term retirement program is kind of a mental construct of sorts that's designed to get you out of debt permanently and put you in a position where you can leverage other people's efforts to become financially free. So that's it in a nutshell.
Sure.
And I want to give you an illustration of it, okay? Now, you and I have been friends for a long time.
Yes.
But we could just as easily interview anyone here in the room. We could interview, well, Craig might be a little bit of a different story, but, you know, any of the film crew here, or, you know, your agent, any of your staff. And realistically, do you think it's realistic to say that they were all encouraged to do well in school?
Correct.
Okay. And they finished school, and they were all encouraged, most likely, to go to college.
Go to school, get a good job, work 30 years.
Okay, you're getting ahead of me.
Sorry.
Sorry. But then go to college, whatever the cost.
Correct.
Would you agree with that?
Yes. Get student loans. Take out as much student loans as you need to.
I just used the words, whatever the cost. You know, different people leverage it different ways. The most common is student loans, which student loan debt is the biggest debt in America today. It exceeds credit card debt. The total credit card debt of American citizens is surpassed in trillions by student loan debt today. So, and then you get out of school and you're encouraged to go get a safe, secure job and get benefits. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you're encouraged to buy a house and you're encouraged to get, really, you don't have a choice. Most people, they only will qualify for a 30-year loan.
Correct.
Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And you also would agree that most people, when you get a job, you give part of your check, a significant part of it, to the IRS and to Social Security tax. Would you agree with that? It's it's involuntary. It's just
unavoidable.
It's unavoidable. Unless you want to go to prison, which we advocate following all laws in the book. This is not a book on dodging taxes. And then lastly, Curtis, do you agree that, and I'm trying to think of how to put this, most people would fit into a box. Well, let's make it easier. Do you agree that about 76% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and don't even have $500 of discretionary disposable income?
Yes.
Okay. So what we've done is we've described 3/4 of the nation, and they all have three things in common. One, most, if not all of them, have been encouraged to go to school, do well, and whatever the cost, they're going to get student loans. Most of them go and get a safe, quote-unquote, safe, secure job with benefits where they capitulate half of their check to taxes, right? Mm-hmm. And then lastly, most of them get a 30-year loan where the remaining half of their take-home pay is capitulated to the 30-year loan payment every month. The housing payment would be their biggest payment.
Correct.
That's what I call the trifecta of death. Okay? And once you get on that thin gray line and you cross over where you have a job and half of your check goes to taxes, where you have unbankruptable student loan debt or significant credit card debt and or both, and you have a 30-year loan,
you might as well throw in a car payment.
As far as I'm concerned, you're done. Now, when I say you're done, what I mean by that is unless you make a radical discretionary change, there's no way you can climb out of that. And I show why in the book. I show why because of the mathematics involved with the amortization schedules, how the banks pay themselves first for really the first 21 years of your mortgage, a variety of other factors involved. But as far as I'm concerned, that's the trifecta of death. Now, somebody who takes $50,000 a year home in salary and has a trifecta of death is doomed. But most people think when they get to $100,000 a year, that's considered wealthy money. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
I've shown mathematically in the book the $100,000 a year earner hits a trifecta of death. It's the same thing.
They're broke at a higher
it's
level.
$50,000. They're broke. They're going broke on $100,000 a year. The $200,000 a year earner, it's the same. Okay. Why? Because they're giving away half of their money to the IRS and to the Federal Reserve. Well, to the federal income tax, and then they are giving 40% minimally of their take-home pay to a 30-year mortgage, and you just can't win that way. And if that is all anybody gets out of reading the book or from this podcast, that's the most important lesson I can impart.
And it's funny. I think back because we worked together. You were my first mentor in real estate. We separated for a while. We came back together a few years later, working with another.
That was fun.
It was a good time. Really now I remember sitting in the back office, and I remember you had these crazy ideas. Now for the listeners there, for me, the short-term retirement program in its infancy to me was just really a more radical way of structuring.
It's like an accelerated private lending program.
It was a very creative private lending program, and it's funny because if you don't mind, I got a few examples.
I don't mind.
All right. So for people listening and the viewers, part of the way that this actually kind of worked back in the day was, say you took a $60,000 property and you purchased it doing the standard 20% down plus closing costs, and you put it on a 30-year program. It's essentially what everybody does, right?
Cookie cutter.
Exactly. Now, the cash flow that you make monthly is great, and you've got a good return on investment. But what I wrote down here was I ran this through a mortgage calculator, and the principal and interest payments that you will make total over 30 years is basically called $135,000 principal and interest payments. Now, what the short-term retirement program was, when I remember in the very beginning,
that's about double, right? What they paid. They borrow
Yes.
70, and they're gonna pay back 140 over time.
Correct. So now in this example, we take that same property, but we put 50% down.
Mm-hmm.
And then now keep in mind, this is a program for real estate investors. That's kind of what this initially started out as. So for the real estate investor, they're going to put 50% down, but we're going to put it on a true 7-year amortized loan.
7-year note.
Correct. 50% down, 7-year loan. Now the interest rate was a little bit higher on this one, but running this through the same calculator, principal and interest total at 7 years was $51,600. So I remember when you talked about this, because this was such a radical concept, I remember feeling or thinking to myself, well, no one's going to do this because it's always about the cash flow. The cash flow is low. The return on investment is low. Why would somebody do this? 5 years felt like an eternity in theory. But what's so funny that I remember is that 5 years later, for the people who were doing this, that's how fast it went.
Oh yeah, you look at a guy like, I don't know if you remember Terry Summers. Was
Yes.
Yes. Terry and I talk periodically once or twice a year, and he says to me, Robert, I'm financially free because of your program.
Yeah.
And of course, he was buying at the right time in the post 2008 collapse,
Correct.
where things were so inexpensive.
Correct.
And he leveraged heavily into that 5 and 7 year program. He's got like 20 paid off homes today, and that's great. That's all great. But the short term retirement program was not. I did not write this 400+ page book for people to build a real estate empire.
Correct.
I wrote this book, and this is what I call volume 1. It's really designed as 3 volumes. If I can ever find time out of my schedule to sit and write. It's designed for the people that are in that trifecta of death, who just want to get out. How do I get out? And it starts with understanding not even basic principles of real estate, but understanding how the U.S. economy works. I mean, this book is partly an economic primer, and I'll give you an example. Most people don't even understand that the Federal Reserve, they think it's a branch of the federal government, and it's not. The Federal Reserve is a private bank. It's a division of the Bank of England. It has nothing to do with the government. It doesn't answer to the government. The government, for all intents and purposes, answers to it. It decides what rates are, whether they go up or down. If the U.S. Treasury, and I detail this in my book, but it's interesting to know because a lot of people don't understand how it works. If the U.S. Treasury wants to print money, it has to go to the Federal Reserve and get its permission to print money in the form of an electronic transaction. Like example, say $1 million needs to be printed by the Federal Reserve just to put it into circulation. Well, the Federal Reserve approves it, and then we'll send it $1 million digitally, right? And in return, the Federal Reserve gets U.S. Treasury notes, and which can be sold at a discount and so forth. And this is all detailed on the Federal Reserve's website. And what you realize is, and those Treasury notes, the U.S. taxpayers pay interest on it. The biggest part of the federal debt, aside from entitlements, is interest to the Federal Reserve. So what's really going on here? Well, what's really going on is you have a private non-U.S. entity issuing U.S. people currency at interest. It's a terrible system. It passed in 1913. And the Federal Reserve on its website has a stated mission of controlling and creating an inflationary policy, which is allegedly, based on market conditions, fixed about 2% a year. Well, what does that mean? What that means is that if we had $1 50 years ago, that dollar has now gone through inflation and a dollar attrition, what I call dollar attrition, to 0 as of today, which means that the currency of the United States is eroding at a rate of 2% a year. This is why a gallon of gas, a gallon of milk, a gallon of organic milk today, things that you would pay 79 cents for when you're growing up in South Dakota is now $7.79. It's not because milk is getting more expensive. It's because the dollar is experiencing attrition. Now, what does that mean for the person in the quote-unquote trifecta of debt? Well, this is what it means. What it means is that if you're not paying off your bills today, if you're not able to leverage money in today's dollars, everything that you're tabling, it gets more expensive down the line. Buying a home today is the cheapest it's ever going to be, barring extreme market conditions, right? And assuming that homes appreciate, for example. Like your milk, barring a glut of milk in the milk market, for example, is never going to go down from today's prices. It will only go up. The same thing with gas. I mean, you see fluctuations.
Sure.
But if you look at
it's always on a steady.
If you look at time versus price, the price is always on a gradual incline. Well, that's because of the Federal Reserve. That's because its goal is to create inflation. And when you create inflation, and there's many economists out there that would say Robert Feol doesn't know what he's talking about. But as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that the book is for the safety and security of the American family, the American citizen who chooses to go to work every day. That's where my interest lies. And inflation hurts those families. It hurts them every day. You feel it at the pump. You feel it at the grocery store. And when you capitulate half of your taxes to the U.S. government, and then it gets sent as foreign aid and other entitlement programs, spending that doesn't even go back to the citizens of the United States, it's very hard to get ahead. And that's part of what the book is about. The first section of the book is titled Money as a Mental Construct. Understanding what is money, what does it mean in your mind, and what is your belief set and your belief systems with money. And I'll give you an example. Can I give you an example
Sure.
that you will appreciate?
I can't wait.
As you and I grew up as kids. Would you agree? Did you ever rake leaves for a living?
Sure. I mean, we raked, mowed, all that stuff.
Okay. Did you ever do it for money? You never raked your neighbor's yard for $10?
Maybe.
You never mowed your neighbor's yard for $10?
Probably.
Okay, you probably did. So let's just say back in the days of Curt Davis' youth, you needed to make some money, right? For whatever. What were you interested in back as a kid?
Skateboarding.
Skateboarding. You can get a new pair of trucks.
That's right.
How much was a new pair of trucks? $20?
Yeah, $20, $30.
Tony Hawk style?
Of course.
Okay, we'll call it $30. So you're going to go mow your neighbor's lawn. How much are you going to charge me to mow this lawn, Kurt? Maybe like $30, right? Try to get you $30. And she'll be like, well, I'm not going to pay you 30, but I'll pay you 20. And you're like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you go and earn $20. It's close to 30. Then you go somebody else's lawn and you get your $20. But never, ever are you thinking about going over there and say, listen, this is what I'll do. I'll charge you, I will mow your lawn the whole month for $150, as many times as it needs. Well, but you know it, maybe it's not the rainy season, so you only mow it twice. So it's an advantageous transaction to you. Because all you're thinking about is a $30 pair of trucks.
Sure.
Money, in your mind, is defined as a $30 pair of trucks.
Correct.
And you are asking prices, you are trying to command prices within that $30 economy. Do you agree?
Yes.
Never do you think to yourself, well, maybe I should, start a lawn mowing business and get all my friends who want to buy trucks, and I'll pay them $8 an hour, and I'll charge her $20, and then I could override it by $10. We think in terms of very short term today. Your average paycheck to paycheck worker. Example, say they take home $1,000 every 2 weeks. Not unrealistic. Most Americans make about $32,000 a year. Would you agree?
Yes.
So take home $1,000 every 2 weeks. Now, if the brakes go out on that person's car, well, let's say this. Say they don't tithe. Tithing is important, but we're not going to get into that.
Sure.
Tithing is defined as giving 10% of your money. If that person, you say, well, listen, you should tithe 10%. And they're like, well, I don't have enough money left over to tithe. I really need that $100. In their mind, they don't have enough money to tithe. Agreed?
Yes.
But let's say their money is truly spent and the brakes go out on their car, so they can't get to work. And their brakes cost $100 to fix. Is that person going to be able to go and find $100? Work and get $100? They would probably work to keep their brakes going, right?
Yes.
They're going to come up with $100. Somehow, somewhere. Whether it's cutting their own spending or whether it is going out and raking the yard. They might go say, listen, I'll rake your yard for $50. Okay, great. I'll mow your lawn for $50. They go up and down the street. They get up $100. But the point is that they're always thinking about getting, like, you can't make it work. You can't make tithing work because you're short. But when an emergency comes up, you can make it work. But they're never thinking about more than $100. They're thinking about, how do I command this crisis? That's because money is all a mental concept. It's symbolized in paper, in silver, and gold, and other precious assets, but in your mind. This is why a $30,000 a year earner, if they lose their job, they start looking for $30,000 a year jobs. Never do they think about asking for a $50,000 job or seeing who's doing what. We talk about that in the book. Money is a mental concept. It's a construct. And you have to understand that if you want to become wealthy.
Fascinating.
Do you really think that's fascinating? I
hope
so. I
it
can't tell
is-
if you're
no,
bored
no,
or
no.
if you're fascinated.
No, I had my eyes closed the whole time. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It is fascinating because you're right. A lot of people don't think of this. They just think of the initial need. It's like, I need $100. What can I do real quick? When you were talking about that, I thought to myself, what happens in that break example is that they have the $100. It's just they're going to rob from, they've allocated that money for something else. They're going to take that money and use it for that because that's the desired need right this moment. They need that. They'll have to go without something else.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. Or the other way is they might go and try to, go do some day labor or something, and that takes a variety of forms. And the point